Too many people rush into relationships looking at the other person, asking, who is he? What does he do? How can he treat me? Will he respect me? But before you ask those questions, you must stop and ask yourself the most important one, who am I? Because until you know who you are, you will never know what you deserve. Until you know who you are, you will never know how to be treated. And until you know who you are, you will always be defined by how someone else sees you. Knowing who you are is the foundation of power. It is the source of confidence, of strength, of self-respect. If you don't know your identity, you will bend and break for the approval of others. You will shrink yourself to fit into someone else's definition of beauty, worth, or value. You will tolerate what you were never meant to tolerate. That is why the first step to being treated like royalty is to understand your own crown. Think about it. If you don't know your value, how can you expect someone else to know it? If you walk into a room unsure of yourself, uncertain about your voice, afraid to stand tall, people will sense it, and the world always reflects the energy you project. That means if you see yourself as less, others will treat you as less. But when you carry yourself with certainty, with clarity, with power, people have no choice but to respect you. So ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when the makeup comes off, when the lights go down, when the crowd is gone? Because that answer defines everything. If your identity is built on attention, on likes, on someone else's validation, then your identity is fragile. But if your identity is built on self-respect, on discipline, on unshakable belief, then no man, no rejection, no circumstance can ever take it away. Knowing who you are is not about arrogance. It is not about walking around declaring yourself above others. It is about clarity. It is about being unshakable in your worth, so that when someone tries to lower the standard, you don't bend. When someone tries to test your boundaries, you don't break. When someone tries to tell you that you are too much, you understand that they are simply not enough for the level you stand on. Many people waste years trying to figure out who someone else is, studying their habits, their actions, their character, without first studying themselves. They only want to know if he is strong, but they never ask if they are strong. They want to know if he is loyal, but they never ask if they are loyal to their own values. They want to know if he can lead, but they never ask if they can stand in their own leadership. If you want to be treated like a queen, then you must think like one. And a queen does not build her power on the foundation of someone else's identity. She builds it on her own. So what does it mean to know who you are? It means looking in the mirror and not just seeing a reflection, but recognizing a destiny. It means understanding your strengths and also your weaknesses. It means admitting what you need to work on without tearing yourself down. It means embracing the journey of growth without waiting for someone else to complete you. Because the truth is, no one completes you. You are already whole. You are already powerful. You are already enough. When you know who you are, you attract differently. You walk differently. You speak differently. Your energy is undeniable. Men notice it, but more importantly, you notice it. You carry yourself with dignity, and you don't have to announce it. It radiates from you. You don't have to demand respect. It is given naturally. You don't have to chase love. It finds you because your presence demands it. But if you don't know who you are, you will settle for anything. You will believe lies about yourself. You will tolerate disrespect, thinking it's normal. You will shrink your voice so others can feel comfortable. You will chase attention instead of attracting respect. That is why knowing yourself is not optional. It is essential. It is the very foundation on which everything else is built. And here is the truth. Knowing who you are is a daily practice. It is not discovered in one moment. It is built through discipline, through reflection, through choices. Every time you say no to something beneath your standard, you are defining who you are. Every time you walk away from someone who cannot match your energy, you are defining who you are. Every time you choose growth over comfort, strength over weakness, clarity over confusion, you are defining who you are. Because in the end, the world will only treat you according to the identity you claim. If you claim smallness, you will be treated as small. If you claim uncertainty, You will be treated as replaceable. But if you claim royalty, if you claim power, if you claim self-respect, then you will be treated as such. Before you ever sit across from someone, before you ever ask him what his goals are, what his values are, what he believes in, you must first ask yourself, do I know who I am? Because when you don't know who you are, you cannot possibly know what to look for in another person. You will be pulled into confusion, into compromise, into relationships where you are lost because you never found yourself first. Most people go into connections asking, is he loyal? Is he strong? Is he ambitious? Is he ready for me? But the greater question is, am I loyal to myself? Am I strong enough to stand on my own? Am I ambitious about my life? Am I ready for me? Because if you are not clear on your own identity, then every answer someone else gives you will control the direction of your life. Knowing who you are means building an inner foundation so strong that no smile, no sweet words, no empty promises can shake you. It means you do not chase after potential, you align with reality. It means you no longer measure yourself against what someone else can give you, because you already walk with fullness. When you know who you are, you no longer tolerate half effort, half love, or half respect. You begin to filter out what does not match your standard. Think about it, when a person doesn't know who they are, they cling to anyone who gives them attention. They think the presence of someone else defines their value. They confuse being wanted with being worthy. But when you know who you are, you stop chasing attention and start attracting respect. You stop looking for someone to complete you and instead stand as someone already complete. You become the prize, the standard, the crown, and you allow no one to lower that. Ask yourself the difficult questions. What do I stand for? What do I refuse to compromise? What do I demand of myself? Because how you answer those questions shapes the way you live. If you don't demand respect from yourself, how can you expect respect from someone else? If you don't know what loyalty looks like in your own life, how can you identify it in another? If you don't practice discipline with yourself, how can you expect someone else to live with discipline toward you? Too many women spend their time investigating the character of man while neglecting their own. They want to know what he believes in, but they haven't clarified their own beliefs. They want to know how he handles pressure, but they avoid facing their own struggles. They want to know how he will love them, but they haven't yet mastered how to love themselves. That is why knowing yourself comes first. Because once you are grounded in your identity, you see people for who they truly are, not for who you are desperate for them to be. Knowing who you are gives you vision. It allows you to walk into a room with clarity instead of confusion. You don't stumble through life asking, what does he want from me? Instead, you stand firm and declare, this is who I am. This is what I require. This is where I am going. And suddenly relationships stop being a game of guessing and become a process of alignment. Those who fit your path will rise to meet you. Those who do not will naturally fall away. When you don't know who you are, you settle, you accept less. You believe lies about yourself. You think disrespect is normal because you have no clear measure of what you deserve. You tolerate words that cut you down because you haven't yet built the strength to stand tall. But when you know who you are, settling becomes impossible. You refuse to lower your crown just to make someone else feel taller. You refuse to stay in places that diminish your fire. You refuse to let the wrong company steal your vision. This is why the journey inward is so important. Knowing yourself requires solitude. It requires silence. It requires stripping away the noise of social media, of false opinions, of temporary validation, and asking, who am I beneath all of this? You must know your scars, your strengths, your story, and your standards. Because when you do, you stop being swayed by the image someone else projects and you start seeing the truth behind the mask. If you don't know who you are, you will always live reactive. You will bend to whatever someone else wants you to be. You will change your personality, your dreams, your voice, all to fit into their mold. But if you know who you are, you live proactive, you set the mold, you set the tone, you set the pace, you walk in strength, and the world adjusts to you. That is the power of identity. It is not just knowing your name, your job, or your appearance. It is knowing your essence. It is carrying clarity about your purpose, your path, and your worth. Because the truth is simple before you ask who he is, before you evaluate his strength, his loyalty, his worth, you must first establish your own. You must be so rooted in who you are that no man, no circumstance, no rejection, no distraction can ever make you forget it. Every time you step into a relationship, you carry with you the image you have of yourself. The way you see yourself determines the way others will see you. If you don't know who you are, you will always measure yourself through his eyes. You will be waiting for him to tell you that you are beautiful, that you are worthy, that you are enough. But if you already know who you are, you no longer need his confirmation. You already walk with it. This is why self-knowledge is not a suggestion, it is a requirement. Too many women are asking, who is he? Can he provide? Can he lead? Can he love me? But they skip the most important question, who am I? And what do I bring to the table? Because when you know yourself, you stop entering relationships from a place of need and you start entering them from a place of power. You are no longer there to be completed. You are there to be complemented. When you don't know who you are, you cling. You cling to his words, his attention, his presence. You make him the mirror that reflects your worth. And when that mirror cracks, so does your identity. That's why so many people lose themselves in love. It's not because love is dangerous, it's because they never had a strong foundation of self to begin with. But when you know who you are, you don't get lost. You remain rooted, even if the relationship changes. Ask yourself, what are my non-negotiables? What do I refuse to sacrifice? What values define me? These are not small questions. They are the blueprint for your life. If you don't know your values, you will adopt his. If you don't know your mission, you will follow his path even when it leads you away from your destiny. If you don't know your worth, you will let him decide it for you. That is why clarity of self is the first shield of protection against disappointment, disrespect, and destruction. A woman who knows herself does not chase. She does not beg. She does not sit around hoping to be chosen. She walks as though she is already chosen because she has chosen herself. She has chosen her growth, her purpose, her standard. That energy is magnetic. That energy commands respect. That energy makes men rise or disappear because either they meet the standard or they fall away. Think of a queen. A queen never asks a man to validate her crown. She doesn't need to say, do you see it? Do you think it fits me? No. The crown speaks for itself. The crown is not up for debate, and neither is her worth. That is what it means to know who you are. It means you carry your crown without apology. It means you stop dimming your light so that others can feel comfortable in your presence. It means you refuse to shrink your dreams, your ambition, or your voice for the sake of keeping someone else around. But too many ignore this truth. They keep asking, who is he? Before they ever ask, who am I? They want to know if he is faithful, yet they haven't decided what faithfulness to themselves looks like. They want to know if he is confident, yet they still carry insecurities that run their life. They want to know if he can lead, yet they haven't taken control of their own direction. That is the mistake, placing all the power on him when the real power has always been within you. Knowing who you are gives you the strength to walk away when something does not align. Without that strength, you will stay in places where you are mistreated because you don't believe you deserve better. You will excuse red flags because you don't trust your own judgment. You will confuse being tolerated with being loved. But when you know yourself, you refuse to stay in places that insult your soul. You refuse to beg for respect that should have been given from the start. You refuse to believe that suffering is the price of love. Identity brings clarity. When you know who you are, you know what you want, and more importantly, what you will not accept. You don't need to interrogate every man. You don't need to lose sleep wondering what he thinks. Instead, you live by your standard, and the right one will reveal himself by whether or not he can match it. You stop wasting time on confusion because confusion is a symptom of not knowing yourself. Clarity dissolves confusion. And here is the truth that many avoid. Knowing yourself is not always comfortable. It requires honesty. It requires facing your flaws, your fears, your weaknesses without denial. It requires admitting the parts of you that you've been avoiding. But it is through this honesty that you build unshakable strength, because once you have confronted yourself, no one else's opinion can break you. Once you have embraced your own scars, no one else can use them against you. So before you ask about his character, know your own. Before you ask about his vision, know your own. Before you ask if he is ready for you, make sure you are ready for yourself. Because if you skip this step, you will always build your life around someone else's identity. But if you master this step, you will never again settle for less than what aligns with your worth. Before you ever demand loyalty, respect, or love from a man, you must first demand it from yourself. Too often, the focus is on evaluating him, his actions, his intentions, his background, his potential, yet very little time is spent on evaluating yourself. The question is not only, who is he, but first and foremost, who am I, and have I built the standard that requires the treatment I expect? Because if you have not defined yourself, then you will always be defined by someone else. Knowing who you are means stepping into every situation with clarity. It means you are not moved by compliments, nor are you destroyed by criticism. You are steady, grounded, centered in your own identity. That steadiness is what commands respect. When you do not know yourself, you become easily swayed. A sweet word can make you lower your guard. A kind gesture can make you ignore red flags, and the fear of being alone can make you accept half love. But when you know yourself, you cannot be manipulated. You cannot be bought. You cannot be broken. Ask yourself this: do I love myself enough to demand real love from others? Do I respect myself enough to accept nothing less than respect? Do I trust myself enough to recognize when something is wrong? Because if you don't, then no matter how good he looks, no matter how strong his words sound, you will always be vulnerable to settling for less than you deserve. The problem is that many seek identity in a relationship instead of seeking it within. They define themselves by being someone's girlfriend, someone's wife, someone's partner, instead of being whole in themselves. And when that relationship changes, their entire identity shatters. That is why you must know yourself before you ever define him. Because relationships should be two complete people coming together, not two broken halves trying to make a whole. When you know yourself, you stop chasing. You stop begging for someone to notice you, to value you, to validate you. You carry your value within. You walk with it in every room. And men sense it. They see the difference between a woman who doubts herself and a woman who knows herself. Doubt attracts disrespect. Certainty attracts honor. When you are grounded in who you are, you no longer compete for attention. You command it without trying. Clarity about yourself also saves you time. When you know who you are, you don't waste years on people who do not align with your path. You recognize quickly when something does not fit your standard, and you walk away without hesitation. But when you don't know yourself, you stay too long, you make excuses, you hold on to potential instead of reality. You wait for someone to change, all while losing yourself in the process. Knowing who you are means setting boundaries and sticking to them. It means saying, this is the line, and I will not allow anyone to cross it. Boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They are gates to let the right love in. Without boundaries, you leave yourself open to anything and everything. But with boundaries, you protect your peace, your dignity, your worth. And the right man will respect those boundaries because he recognizes they come from strength. There is also power in self-awareness. To know yourself is not only to recognize your strengths, but also to confront your weaknesses. It is easy to declare, I am strong, I am worthy, I am confident, but true knowledge of self also includes admitting where you need growth. If you run from your flaws, you remain blind to them, and they will sabotage your life. But if you face them, you transform them into fuel for growth. Self-awareness creates authenticity, and authenticity commands respect. Too often, people want a relationship to define their purpose. They think, once I find him, I'll know who I am. But purpose is not found in another person. It is found in yourself. If you enter a relationship without purpose, you will make his purpose your own. You will live in his shadow, follow his path, and forget your own. But if you know your mission, your goals, your destiny, then any relationship becomes an addition to your life, not the definition of it. When you know yourself, you no longer fear being alone. Loneliness loses its grip because you realize you are already whole. You realize solitude is not emptiness. It is strength. It is in solitude that you hear your own voice, that you understand your own heart, that you sharpen your own mind. A woman who fears being alone will always settle. But a woman who knows herself will never accept less than what aligns with her worth. And this is the truth. Men respect a woman who respects herself. They may play with someone who is unsure of herself, but they cannot ignore the presence of a woman who knows who she is. She doesn't demand respect. It is given naturally. She doesn't beg for love, it finds her. She doesn't lower her standard, she holds it, and the right man rises to meet it. That is the power of identity, and that is why before you ask who he is, you must first know who you are. Every relationship begins with a mirror, but too many people hold the mirror up to the other person first. They want to study his actions, his patterns, his intentions, while ignoring the most vital reflection, their own. Before you ask, who is he? You must confront the deeper question, who am I? And do I truly know myself well enough to decide what I deserve? Because if you do not know yourself, every decision you make in love will be unstable, built not on clarity but on confusion. Knowing who you are means you understand your value without needing constant reminders. It means you walk with confidence that is not dependent on how much attention you get or how many compliments you hear. When you know yourself, your worth is not fragile. It is not something someone else can give or take away. It is anchored deep within you. This inner strength changes everything about how you move in relationships. It prevents you from begging for love, from clinging to what is toxic, from tolerating what diminishes your dignity. Think about it. How many times do people lose themselves because they never discovered themselves in the first place? They ask questions like, is he the one? Does he really love me? Will he stay? While never asking, am I in alignment with who I was created to be? Am I living by my standards? Or am I lowering them just to keep him around? When you do not know who you are, you will always compromise your truth in exchange for his attention. But when you do know who you are, compromise becomes impossible because you refuse to abandon yourself in the pursuit of someone else. Identity is power. A woman who knows herself does not walk into a room trying to be chosen. She walks into the room already chosen. Chosen by herself. Chosen by her discipline, her growth, her purpose. That type of energy cannot be ignored. Men feel it. People feel it. The world responds to it. And that is why the question of identity must always come before the question of relationship. Ask yourself, what do I believe in? What kind of life am I building? What is non-negotiable for me? If you do not answer these questions for yourself, someone else will answer them for you, and you may not like the result. When you know yourself, you draw a clear line in the sand, and you refuse to let anyone push you beyond it. You establish boundaries that protect your peace, and you don't apologize for them. Boundaries are not about keeping people out. They are about keeping your dignity intact. The truth is, many women want to know if a man can handle their strength, their independence, their ambition, but they themselves have not yet embraced those qualities. They dull their own fire because they are afraid it will be too much. They silence their own voice because they are afraid it will be too loud. They lower their own crown because they are afraid it will intimidate. But when you know yourself, you stop apologizing for your power. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You carry your presence without fear because you understand that the right people are not threatened by your greatness, they are inspired by it. When you do not know who you are, you become addicted to validation. You depend on texts, calls, compliments, and gestures to remind you that you matter. But validation is a dangerous drug. It feels good for a moment, but it fades quickly, leaving you desperate for the next dose. And this desperation weakens you, making you settle for attention that is shallow instead of love that is real. But when you know who you are, you no longer chase validation because your worth is not up for debate. You don't need him to say, "You're beautiful," for you to believe it. You don't need him to prove your value. You embody it every single day. Knowing yourself also brings freedom. It frees you from the chains of comparison, from the lies that say you must be like someone else to be valuable. When you know yourself, you understand that your uniqueness is your crown. You stop copying others and you stop competing with them because there is no competition when you are authentic. And this authenticity makes you unforgettable. A woman who knows herself does not blend in. She stands out not because she is trying to, but because she cannot be anything other than herself. And here is the most important part. When you know yourself, you create standards that are rooted in clarity, not fear. You don't ask, "Will he stay if I demand this?" You ask, "Does this align with who I am?" And if it doesn't, you walk away, no matter how good it looks, no matter how tempting it feels. Because when you know yourself, you would rather be alone in truth than together in compromise. This is why identity always comes before evaluation. If you are not clear on who you are, then your vision will be clouded. You will confuse charm with character, potential with reality, attraction with alignment. But when you are clear on who you are, you see with sharper eyes. You no longer fall for appearances. You look deeper. You no longer get lost in promises. You pay attention to patterns. You no longer hand over your crown. You guard it because you understand its worth